Tonight, the year is 1997. John Howard is Prime Minister. Pauline Hanson launches One Nation. And rock star Michael
Police began an extensive search of nearby grassland but found no clues to the little boy's disappearance.
It's where Jaidyn Leskie, a 13-month-old toddler, goes missing.
After 17 days of nothing, the chances of finding Jaidyn alive now are very, very remote.
What follows is a murder investigation unlike any other, which begins with a bizarre attack using a pig's head and ends with the arrest and trial of Greg Domaszewicz, the little boy's babysitter.
Okay, he's got him, I just want him back.
Nearly all with a role to play in this case will feel scorched and brutally exposed in the relentless and intense reporting by the media. Lives and relationships will be openly judged and their working-class environment scrutinised.
Keep video camera record, okay?
Tonight, we'll re-examine the police investigation of Jaidyn Leskie's murder. The fiercely fought defence case will reveal why the jury let the prime suspect go free.
The Supreme Court jury has cleared 30-year-old Domaszewicz of killing the little boy.
And we'll ask the questions Greg Domaszewicz never faced in court in his first television interview in 20 years. There was no accident?
No, there's a big difference from an accident, you know, to say murder.
Good evening, I'm Liz Hayes, and this is Under Investigation. Joining me, Roland Legg, the former Victoria Police homicide detective who led the investigation into Jaidyn Leskie's murder. Keith Moore, the experienced crime reporter who covered the case for Melbourne's Herald Sun. Historian Dr. Elise Rosser, who has researched child murders in Australia with a focus on the Jaidyn Leskie case. And the Honourable Anthony Wheely QC, former Supreme Court judge and one of the country's leading barristers. Why is it that this case looms so large still to this day? What is it, Keith Moore, that makes you still want to write about this story?
Look, a lot of people compared it early on to the Azera Chamberlain case. The public were really fascinated by it, and obviously the fact that a person was charged and then acquitted, it's still unsolved, and everybody has a view on it.
Roland Legg, you headed up the investigation. This is a case that has unfinished business for you.
Well, you always regret that you didn't win a case at the end of the day, but first of all, you're investigating the ultimate crime. And obviously, you would like someone to pay a price and justice be seen to be done. And that, I think, becomes even more important when it's the life of an innocent, defenceless child.
Elise, from your perspective, what is it about this trial? Because it had a huge impact, didn't it, socially?
A lot of the media coverage essentially constructed Moe as a site of rural failure, where they're like, look at all these individuals, and you know how awful they are and how disadvantaged they are and how bogan they are. And that was the word that was never said often, but was implied constantly.
And Judge?
Well, I think the media and other people clearly expected that the accused would be found guilty of this crime, but as it turned out, he was acquitted. And this is a justification of the strength of the jury system. Yes, a killer has gone free, but who that killer is remains an unsolved mystery.
Well, let's go through what we do know. On Saturday, June 14th, 1997, Greg Domaszewicz, a 28-year-old unemployed mechanic, went to the home of his girlfriend, Belinda Murphy, and asked if he could babysit her son, Jaidyn, for the afternoon. Belinda was headed out with her sister, and after a big night of drinking, Greg would later pick her up and drive her home. But Belinda would never see her son again. And to her horror, 6 months later, Jaidyn's body was discovered in a dam. He had been murdered. Greg Domacewicz's account of that day and night is at times unbelievable and will make him the central suspect.
This is your opportunity now to tell us what happened. Nothing happened.
He'd looked after Jaidyn a number of times before, and this time Greg claimed Jaidyn happily played that afternoon as he worked on his car. Jaidyn, he said, did have a small accident causing a bloody nose, but nothing serious. And in the evening, he put the toddler to bed. At about 2 a.m, Greg drives to a pub in a nearby town to collect Belinda. He says he leaves Jaidyn sleeping. What happens next is an incident so bizarre, it will catapult this case to national attention. Unbeknown to Greg, waiting outside his place is a small gang planning a gruesome attack on his house. Armed with a pig's head, Moe local Kenny Penfold has come seeking retribution because he believed Greg treated his sister Yvonne poorly when they had been in a relationship. After Greg drove out that night, Kenny and one of his mates hurled the pig's head at the windows of the house. When Greg returns with Belinda, he sees the pig's head and the damage done. It's then, he says, that he realises Jaidyn is missing.
Front door was still secure when you got here. Okay, you walk in, and like, the little fella wasn't there, and the panic, I just thought he still, like, you know, he's only a baby, but he might, you know, got scared. And did you tell Belinda?
Greg says he panics, takes Belinda, who is extremely intoxicated, to her home, then heads out into the night to search for the missing toddler. And so the stage is set for a case that will electrify Australia. A little boy lost, his babysitter, and a bizarre pig's head attack. The media sniffed the story and journalists raced to Moe, a quiet country town 150 kilometres east of Melbourne.
Appeal for Jaidyn, Belinda.
Joining the media throng was Today Extra regular Shelley Horton, who at the time was the crime reporter for ABC Radio.
Do you feel like they were accusing you?
The pig's head story and the man who threw it, Moe local Kenny Penfold, hit the front page.
So what happened was Greg was on and off with Yvonne and on and off with Belinda. So Kenny decided that he was going to prove a point and get back at Greg Domaszewicz by throwing a pig's head through his window. So he and a couple of mates, obviously on the beers, decided to throw this pig's head. They threw it and then they took off.
Threw a pig's head through his window. Just make him leave my sister alone a little bit, been hassling her out for a while.
During an interview, Kenny said, I'll use Kenny's words to as far as I can, me heart was pumping through me chest. I launched the pig's head, and next morning I come round the corner and there's effing coppers everywhere. And I thought to myself, you got to be effing joking, don't you? All that's for an effing pig's head.
To walk into this investigation must have been like a minefield.
A lot of unbelievable characters. You don't have the child. You don't know whether the child's dead or alive. You want to try to find out whether the pig's head people are merely a coincidence or whether they're directly involved. I think, and then all these other things with these relationships. I think one of my first comments was, this isn't a family tree, it's a forest.
Despite the complex relationships and troubled histories, police quickly ruled out the Pig's Head gang as suspects. Roland Legg's team decided there was no evidence anyone had entered Greg Domacewicz's house to take Jaidyn. They reached that conclusion even though 2 windows had been smashed in the attack.
Now this one on the lounge room, it's a higher window than the other one, but right along the bottom of it, there's jagged glass, and there are shards up here. So that's the wider gap, and anybody who was intending to climb through there would be impossible to do it, considering the jagged pieces at the bottom.
But in what was considered their first mistake, Roland Legg's police team did not examine inside the house for fingerprints.
But why not fingerprint all of the material in the house, particularly those objects that looked like they had been used by someone other than Greg?
Well, we were looking at it, that it wasn't, they weren't in there for a social event. If they went in there to get the child, they're not going to be sitting down and having a drink.
Even though Roland and his forensic team say with complete conviction and certainty that no one could have got through the window, there was one person who gave evidence that he could, and that was Kenny Penfold. He said, yeah, I could have done that. Because he was quite a skillful burglar, as we know, and he got through windows in his time. So against that background, just with that possibility, even if it's a remote possibility, the sensible thing to do would be to fingerprint the place from head to foot, and that would prove that no one had been in there. That's what didn't happen.
I can see where the judge is coming from, and I'm not completely discounting it, but that would also give we would have then been accepting that someone could have got in, which we believed 100% they hadn't.
True, that's what you can do, but you've got to be able to have the fingerprinting done first before you can mount the secondary argument.
Yeah. Look, I know what you're saying.
Well, I'm not saying it. I'm just saying that's the way the defence did it.
Sure.
You know.
We, with this whole circumstances of our investigation, were confident, obviously, that those people ultimately were not involved in removing the child. That doesn't mean they were all absolutely reliable.
Been caught up in this bizarre and now I can't go nowhere. I'd never dream of doing something like that. Haven't got the stomach for doing that sort of stuff anyway. Just makes me sick to think that someone else would do it.
Kenny Penfold maintained he was innocent of any involvement in Jaidyn Leskie's disappearance. An early insight into just how difficult the police investigation would be was checking out Kenny Penfold's story in minute detail, right down to the solid evidence he claimed he'd left behind on the night of the Pig's Head attack.
So, as part of his alibi, Kenny actually said to Detective Senior Sergeant Roland Legg, look, I was really nervous about throwing it, so I did a poo near the railway tracks. And I didn't have any toilet paper, so I ripped my flanny pocket off to wipe myself.
I said to him, now, Kenny, a couple of detectives are going to take you back to Domacewicz's house, and I want you to go through every aspect of exactly what occurred, exactly what you saw. So he took them over to the railway line, to the long grass where they'd been laying in wait for Domaszewicz to leave the house. And he started marching up and down the railway line, apparently searching for something, which he found and held up to them. And they said, what's the story here? And he said, well, I didn't have anything to wipe my ass with, that's my shirt pocket.
It was the kind of truth-telling that helped take Kenny Penfold and his Pig's Head gang off the suspect list. But police were already gathering evidence against Greg Domaszewicz, although he claims their focus on him was because of complaints he had made previously about local police. What Roland Legg's investigators did find was $600 in wet money under Greg's mattress and later a wet wallet. This curious find would bolster their case against Greg when Jaidyn's body was found 6 months later in a nearby dam. That was interesting, the wet money under the mattress. That's an intriguing find.
And again, something consistent with another element that we had of the wallet.
You'd wonder why somebody would take $600 with them if they're going to dive into a dam and get it all soaked, but they might.
In their second apparent failure, police, having found wet money under his mattress, did not thoroughly investigate the clothes Greg wore the night of Jaidyn's disappearance.
And while the house was still locked up, or sealed off, we took him back there. And there was a pile of clothing in a rear room. And we said, well, Greg, can you tell us what you were wearing on that night? And he said, yeah, sure. So he proceeded to pick up one piece at a time and sniff it. Now, how that was going to identify what he was wearing on the night, I don't know, but we didn't ever establish exactly what he was wearing that night.
But I just raise, again, the defence case attacked your crime scene examiner quite stringently. The crime scene examiner never identified or photographed the clothing that was in the clothes basket in the laundry, so that if the case was going to be that Greg rushed home and got rid of his wet clothes, why didn't the crime scene examiner take the trouble to check the very obvious thing, namely the clothes in the dirty clothes basket, which he said he didn't do that, but he did notice that whatever was in there was wet. But what was it? Was it a towel? Was it clothes? We don't know. And so that left that possibility unexplored as well.
While the eyes of Australia were on Moe, in Moe, police eyes and ears were on Greg Domaszewicz. A little boy was still missing, and Roland Legg wanted the babysitter kept under close surveillance.
I wanted Greg Domaszewicz followed at an early stage. That evening I contacted Melbourne. I said, I want a full surveillance team down here now, because I'm going to have to give him his car back. It's the only wheels we can give him to be on the move. And there are two reasons for that. Either he had left the child somewhere with someone and it all got out of control, if he was responsible, or the child was already dead, and as has been known to happen in the past, someone might have disposed of a body very quickly without considering it and suddenly think, oh, no, I should have buried it, or oh, no, I should have put it somewhere else. So there are all those considerations.
But the extensive surveillance of Greg Domaszewicz failed to turn up any leads. Coming up, the tragedy and its cast of characters.
So I guess the central people who are involved in the case, I think they were represented as the most bizarre of the bizarre.
Then the police swoop.
On July 16th, 1997, Greg Domaszewicz was arrested and charged with murder.
That's next on Under Investigation. It's June 1997, and the nation's attention is drawn to Moe, the small Victorian country town where 13-month-old Jaidyn Leskie has gone missing. Suspicions are centred on Jaidyn's babysitter, 28-year-old Greg Domaszewicz, who was looking after him while his mother Belinda was on a planned night out drinking. The police have Greg under constant surveillance, but he leads them nowhere.
If the police are able to come up with enough circumstantial evidence that Jaidyn is no longer alive, then a conviction is still possible.
With the search for Jaidyn intensifying, police were trying to build their case against the man they believed knew where he was. Greg Domaszewicz. Across the country, this story is making front-page news. The media continue to be irresistibly drawn to the case and its cast of characters. Greg and Belinda, Kenny Penfold and his sister Yvonne, and their tangled relationships, which saw Kenny and his crew throw a pig's head at Greg's house late in the night, the same night little Jaidyn Leskie disappeared. But the town of Moe also came under the spotlight. Artist John Matses was a Maui local at the time and remembers the unkind depiction of the people who lived there.
They referred to us as hillbillies, and one reporter said something about the fact that when you're in Maui, it's like a scene playing out of the film of Deliverance. All of that sort of stuff. It was just really bad to put up with, because we'd never seen ourselves in that light.
Well, Elise, you've looked into the impact socially of this case. Was this poverty on becoming a spectacle?
Absolutely.
You don't remember me, do you?
I might remember your smell, sir, but not actually your face.
And do you believe that impacted the impression of Belinda
Absolutely.
and Greg and Kenny and Yvonne and anybody else who was touched by this?
I think they were represented as the most bizarre of the bizarre. And I think that it's sort of made for, a soap opera. It made for dramatic television, dramatic media reporting. And it's like, oh, well, look how these people out in the country live. Oh, look what they do out there. They're all sleeping with each other's boyfriends, and that's normal for them. And I think what it did especially, though, was it affected how Belinda was represented.
And how did you think that
A lot of the media basically discussed her as the failed mother. Media articles which say things like, had the headline, "I wasn't drunk, I was very drunk." And they sort of really pictured as she was a drunk, she went out, she left her child alone with a man.
I'd never leave my kids with anyone I didn't sort of trust. I mean, I regret everything now, but, you can't change anything.
When Jaidyn disappeared, Greg Domaszewicz was Belinda's boyfriend, and initially in the investigation, she too was a suspect.
We had the possibility of Belinda covering up for Greg in some way, and she was, of course, in those early stages, not in a great state herself to get any sort of clear story from.
And she was supporting Greg early in the piece.
Oh, she was. And this was another thing. One of our strategies, and I don't think it's any secret, is that after some time and we were beginning to focus more and more on him as our suspect, or our star suspect, I suppose you'd say, it was in our interest to alienate them. Not by any deceptive way, but to just sit her down and say, look, Belinda, we're thinking that you might be involved, or we're thinking that Greg's involved, or whatever. And it's very difficult in a situation like this too, because you're trying to be sympathetic towards the mother who has a missing child and who we believe by this stage is dead. And you want to put her through as little pain as you can.
But she yet was
And she just went back to him.
She was maintaining a relationship with the man that you believed was responsible.
Yes, and I mean, on day one, she indicated to us can only be Greg. But he was constantly telling her that Jaidyn was still alive. I was constantly telling her that Jaidyn was most likely dead. And as a mother, she preferred what he was saying to what I was saying.
Okay, he's got him, I just want him back.
Any idea who may have done this?
No idea at all.
In his early police interviews, Greg rambled and contradicted himself.
You're the person who's lined it up. You haven't been drinking, you haven't been using drugs, you haven't been taking medication.
Yeah.
Why can't you remember? We're talking 6 days ago, and probably one of the most biggest events that's happened in your life, the disappearance of this child.
That's what I mean, you got to remember, I'm under pressure too.
He later said he was simply exhausted.
What have you done to Jaidyn?
I haven't done anything with Jaidyn.
After a month of digging, Roland Legge and his investigative team were convinced of Greg's guilt. But the police case was entirely circumstantial. There was no one piece of conclusive evidence and no body. Yet, on July 16, 1997, police arrested Greg Domaszewicz and charged him with murder.
This is pretty important. You're about to arrest this man in this very high-profile case. You only have circumstantial evidence, and it has to be pretty damn good, doesn't it?
Well, we thought it was, but other people thought it wasn't. So
But you
that's
did.
the reason. Oh, look, I was totally satisfied that we charged the right person.
Then, 6 months after he disappeared, the body of little Jaidyn Leskie was found on New Year's Day, 1998. The terrible discovery was made at Blue Rock Dam, about 20 kilometres out of Maui.
Once the body was recovered in January 1998, there was a fairly broad opinion that this was, quote, the icing on the cake, because all that we discovered on that New Year's Day in 1998 pretty well confirmed all our theories.
The police investigations had found that Greg's wallet was wet the night of Jaidyn's disappearance, and that he placed wet money under his mattress. They also believed a crowbar used to weigh down Jaidyn's body belonged to Greg. But at his murder trial, everything, including the clothes Jaidyn was wearing when he was found, would be called into question.
Belinda gave evidence that the T-shirt he was wearing was not the T-shirt she had given him or given Greg, that the tracksuit was not the tracksuit. So where had they come from? Who'd put those clothes on the child? The sleeping bag she hadn't taken to Greg's place that day. Where did the sleeping bag come from? There were things in the sleeping bag, such as a bib, which she said she'd never, ever given Jaidyn.
With the discovery of Jaidyn's body also came the terrible truth of how he died and his agonising final hours. Forensic pathologist Dr. Shelley Robertson conducted the autopsy.
The deceased, Jaidyn Leskie, had a broken arm which had been splintered in some form, just using a piece of wood and a bandage wrapped around that, splinting the arm.
And in your opinion, what would it take to have a break like this?
A blow of some sort, a direct blow to that region.
There was also a head injury. How significant was that?
That was quite significant.
Do you believe that was the cause of death?
Yes.
This is not an accident?
I don't believe so, no.
And therefore, in your opinion, this child was murdered?
Yes.
On January 14th, 1998, little Jaidyn was buried. Coming up, Greg Domaszewicz breaks his 20-year silence.
Just a mistake, and then ended up costing a young boy his life, which is on me.
Do you believe that the police focused only on you and no one else was ever considered?
100%.
You didn't murder him, you didn't hit him on the head, you didn't break his arm?
No.
That's next on Under Investigation. With the tragic discovery of the body of 13-month-old Jaidyn Leskie, the police believed they nailed their case against the toddler's babysitter, 28-year-old Greg Domaszewicz. They argued there'd been an accident, possibly a car jack falling on Jaidyn and severely breaking his arm, while Greg worked on his vehicle in the backyard. Greg, they believed, panicked, gave Jaidyn a prescribed drug which was found in the little boy's system, and then killed him with a blow to the head, and disposed of his body in a local dam. When his home was unexpectedly attacked by a group throwing a pig's head that night, Greg used it to explain Jaidyn's disappearance. But the police case failed spectacularly, and Greg Domaszewicz walked free. How and why that happened is an extraordinary story. But first, the man at the centre of it all.
It's been more than 20 years since Greg Domaszewicz gave a television interview, but he agreed to sit down with me to talk about the case, and this is what he told me about his decades of agonising regret. Tell me about Jaidyn. What kind of boy was he?
He was a great little kid, you know, like, yeah, I know what to say, like, he was good, he loved the animals, loved, like, mucking around with stuff, like, used to play, you know, like the, you know, Nintendo back then, and I just thought, like, you know, here's a little fella growing up and, you know, he's surrounded by women, and I'm thinking, you know, sort of like, you know, he needs to, you know, get into cars and shooting or fishing or something, you know.
As I understand it, to this day, you still blame yourself for Jaidyn's disappearance.
Of course.
Why do you say that?
If I didn't leave the house to pick up Belinda, nothing would have happened.
So that afternoon when you picked up Jaidyn, you took him back to your place, and what did you do in the afternoon?
I was just like mucking around in my car, and yeah, but he just spent like the afternoon, you know, like while I was doing that, you know, just playing with the dogs.
It was stated that whilst you were working on the car, perhaps the car had been jacked up and had fallen.
There's a big difference from an accident, you know, to say murder or something, like, but nothing happened at all, you know, while he was at my house. It was just like he had a little fall, you know, cleaned him up, this and that, and we were off again, you know, he was playing like.
So that afternoon he did have an accident and he did hurt himself, but it wasn't serious.
Oh, it was nothing. Like, yeah, sorry, I shouldn't say it like that, but yeah, it was just like, yeah, he bumped his nose and he had like a nosebleed, I remember that, and I just, yeah, wanted to clean it up. I didn't see it happen, you know, or anything, you know, like he just came up when I was, you know, still working on the car, and I went, oh, geez, you know. And then, yeah, just like wiped his nose, told him to blow his nose and that, and...
You've said there's a big difference between an accident and murder. I only ask you this because people might see that as you going, look, something accidental occurred rather than murder.
The cops, when they first arrested me, saying, look, Greg, just, you know, tell us where he is. We'll give you, you know, like 2 years or something. You're going to be 2 years on remand anyway. It's like, if an accident happens, it's an accident. But like, you know, they said, oh, the car fell off the jack. It wasn't even on a jack. It was on ramps, you know.
And it didn't fall off at all?
No.
When you got home that night and realised the windows to your house had been smashed, there was a pig's head outside, what did you think? At
first, my initial thought, I can remember, was like, you know, I seen the broken glass on, like as you're coming into the front door, like that window. I thought, fuck, someone's mollytoffed, you know, me house. Thank fuck, you know, it didn't work or go off because Jaidyn's in there and, you know, he would have, you know, like burnt to death or something.
But you found that Jaidyn was missing at that stage. How did you feel?
I don't know, it's like shit, you know, like he is not here.
You didn't tell Belinda that Jaidyn's missing at that point?
No, because I just thought I could find him.
You knew instantly who had thrown that pig's head at your window, did you?
I had very strong, yeah, pretty much, yes.
You felt you knew instantly it was related to Yvonne and Kenny Penfold?
Yeah, Well, I had no other, you know, trouble anywhere else except just from her and the police.
You chose still not to seek their help?
Not for them fucking nuts.
The police say that a person couldn't have climbed through the window, the broken window. There was not enough room. What do you say about that?
Absolute bullshit. You can see, you know, like in the pictures, it was like a 2 metre by 1 metre, you know, hole through glass and being smashed, you know, right down to like the window sort of frame in some places, you know.
Do you believe that the police focused only on you, that you were their target always and no one else was ever considered?
Yes, I mean, yeah, 100%.
And why do you think that was the case?
Well, I was the, you know, only one to say that I seen him, and I was the last to see him. They took my car, you know, they forensicked it, you know.
There was no forensic evidence to show you'd been to the dam, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Can you explain how you had money that was considered wet under your mattress and a wet wallet?
My car leaked water, and because I had like, yeah, like, you know, you crawl under the car sort of thing, it was like my wallet was in the back and I just threw it in the, you know, front floor of the car, which was wet.
How did you feel then when Jaidyn's body was found in the dam?
Mm-hmm.
What was your reaction?
Just anger and pain, and just I was crying. I don't know. Yeah, it's just like, who could do something like that, you know? Like,
and that is the question, who could do something like that?
Sick person, someone maybe iced out or something like you, drugged out. Somebody with fucking problems.
After 16 months behind bars and accused of murdering a helpless child, Greg Domaszewicz emerged from the Supreme Court free to go home to his mum.
When you heard the jury come back and say not guilty, what was that like?
Sort of like, thank God, you know, and then I thought, all right, what happens now? And then, you know, the guards at the, you know, court said, Greg, like, you can go. And I go, what, really? Like, I can just walk now and go? And sort of like shock or overwhelmed.
You had been found not guilty, but the court of public opinion still is quite damning. There was no accident?
No accident, like I said. It's like...
You didn't murder him, you didn't hit him on the head, you didn't break his arm?
No, it's just...
You didn't try and bandage it up as it was found when his body was retrieved?
Yeah, no.
So in other words, there's no part of you that has contributed to this little boy's death, other than you saying you left the house.
Just a mistake, and then ended up costing a young boy his life, you know, which is on me.
Coming up, the Pig's Head team in court.
I'm talking frothing at the mouth, banging on the table like this.
How the police case crumbled.
That's a very tight time frame.
But it's far from impossible.
That's next on Under Investigation. Greg Domacewicz's murder trial began at the Supreme Court of Victoria on October the 12th, 1998. His defence team, headed up by the flamboyant and ferocious QC, the late Colin Lovett, launched a blistering attack. Lovett forcefully argued police had focused almost entirely on Greg Domaszewicz and not fully investigated other potential suspects. Still, to most, it seemed the verdict was a foregone conclusion.
Is that how you felt, Roland?
I don't know whether I mix in the wrong circles, but the majority of people with whom I spoke were pretty much, believing that Greg was responsible.
If you were a member of the public looking at the media coverage, I think it would be a little question as to, you know, who was guilty and who would be convicted.
And Keith, did you feel as though that the police probably had a compelling case?
Yes, I certainly did. And look, to this day, I think Greg was saved by the Pig's Head team, and more importantly, having Colin Lovett.
The late Colin Lovett QC was a legend of the law, a highly theatrical and articulate attack dog.
I thought this case was a weak case, and I've always thought that.
His first mission was to eviscerate the Pig's Head team, Kenny Penfold and his mates, who had carried out the bizarre attack on Greg's house the night of Jaidyn's disappearance. Kenny and his Pig's Head mate, Tubby Hopkinson, went berserk in the courtroom, abusing lawyers and the judge, and completely unravelling under Colin Lovett's fierce cross-examination.
The prosecution chose to put the team, the Pig's Head team, into the witness box. That was a good idea.
Well, it was the only thing we could do. We thought, and look, it was always thought with danger, but also we're obliged to provide the court with all available evidence.
Do you think there
sometimes that doesn't go the way you like.
Do you think their antics in the court, their behaviour in the court, impacted poorly with the jury?
Certainly. Mr. Lovett, as he's entitled to do, saw them as the perfect targets and was goading them. He wanted explosions in the witness box, there's no doubt about that, and he got what he dreamed for.
I'm talking frothing at the mouth, banging on the table like this, having security guards thinking, we've got to stop this. And it went on and on and on. And then remembering, in the summing up, he said, remember, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when Tubby was in the witness box, when Kenny was in the witness box, remember how deranged they were. He actually used the word deranged.
To former Judge Anthony Wheely, the Crown prosecution's case against Greg, based on Roland Legg's police investigation, seemed flawed even before the trial began.
Well, the Crown case was that Greg, probably accidentally or in a bit of a fit of anger, injured the child who died. He then had to decide what to do. He'd take it to her place, put the body in the cot, and when she woke up the next morning after a big night out, she'd think maybe it was her fault. I mean, that always struck me as a pretty implausible case, and they didn't run with it eventually.
What made it implausible to you?
Well, if you woke up and found your baby had died with a fractured skull, it was hardly a cot death, was it, you know? And yet you'd come home and gone to bed full of grog, so how did it happen? You know, it doesn't strike me as particularly logical. But anyway, it didn't work out that way because the Crown said that when he came home to his place with Belinda in the car, and presumably the body over at her place, he then sees the pig head and the broken glass. So cunningly, he changes his whole strategy. And he then follows a timeline where he rescues the body from the house at her place and ultimately buries it in the dam.
Our judge also argues that the prosecution's theory that Greg suddenly decides to exploit the Pig's Head attack to cover for having killed and disposed of Jaidyn's body was a bit of a stretch.
Now, normally a Crown case that's going to succeed is pretty simple. Here, I think it was such a complex thing and it required a sort of arch villain and, you know, cunning, inventive, creative, able to move quickly with changing circumstances. Was Greg Domaszewicz that person? He didn't look like it to me. Yeah, he was quick-witted at times, but he was pretty stupid other times. I don't see him as that arch-villain, but the Crown had to show that he was, and I think that made it difficult.
Roland, your turn.
Take on all that, eh? We believe there was enough time, And sometimes desperate situations call for desperate measures that you might think a person is incapable of doing, but is so desperate they might do it.
The tight timeline, it was argued, made it near impossible for Greg to dispose of Jaidyn's body. After dropping Belinda home, Greg was stopped at 3:30 a.m. for a random breath test. The police case was that Greg returned to his home, collected Jaidyn's body and disposed of it in a dam 20 kilometres away. Greg then returned to Belinda's house and both went to Moe police station.
Now, we know that he's pulled up by the police at 3:30, so let's say 3:35 he leaves that scene and the police drive away. So he's got between 3:35 and 4:45 to get home, to collect the things that he wants to dump the body in, to put all the body in the sleeping bag with the other items, to tie the crowbar to it, and then to put all that back in the car and then drive to the dam, dump the body, get back out, get in your car, drive home, get rid of your clothes, put the wet money under your mattress, leave your wet wallet in the car, put some new clothes on and get around to Belinda's place by 4:45. That's a very tight time frame.
It is tight, but what we're saying is the scene was set. All he had to do after we was pulled over by the police was to go home, get a piece of rope and a crowbar and drive that distance on a deserted, open country road. OK, it's tight, but it's far from impossible.
And it was, you say, doable.
That's our theory. That was our case. And as I say, I've had a lot of time to think about it, and it hasn't swayed me from our initial theory.
Coming up, the stunning verdict.
It's a tough place to be, isn't it? You're the head of the investigation.
Well, as I
so much was riding on it and it failed.
That's next on Under Investigation. For more than 6 weeks, the trial of Greg Domaszewicz for the murder of 13-month-old toddler Jaidyn Leskie dominated the nightly news and daily headlines. The media and the public expected a guilty verdict, but Domaszewicz's fiery defence barrister, the late Colin Lovett QC, demolished the prosecution case, successfully casting serious doubts about Greg's culpability.
Over 3 days, the jury examined a bizarre trail of circumstantial evidence that ranged from mathematics to mayhem to reach their unanimous verdict.
Good evening. After 4 days of deliberations, the Supreme Court jury has cleared 30-year-old Domaszewicz of killing the little boy.
And I would just like to thank the legal team of Colin Lovett, Michael Arthur and John Lee for everything they've done.
How did you feel, Greg?
How was it, Greg?
When they said not guilty, how did you feel? When they said not guilty, how did you feel?
A tough one for you to have to hear, I think, Roland.
Oh, we were disappointed. I mean, it was never 100%.
But based on what you heard in the court and what you saw in the court and what you know happened in the court...
It was always a possibility.
Maybe I should ask you this, Judge. Would you have been surprised if Greg Domaszewicz had been found guilty?
Unfortunately, a criminal trial is not a search for the truth. Some people wish it were, but it's not that. It's a test between the state and an individual citizen, and that high burden is there to protect people. They may be guilty, but that burden's put there to protect them against the might of the state.
And the reason that burden is so high, it's based on the ancient British principle, and it's far better to let 10 guilty men go free than it is for one innocent person to go to jail.
Hard for the community to accept that, but I suppose that's right.
But the truth is we're left with Greg Domaszewicz, quite rightly, can say he's not guilty.
He's been found not guilty, yeah. Is he innocent? Well, that's something other people will debate.
Now, hang on, when you're going to home, would you like to say something to yourself?
It's over. Get the microphone, please.
Adding further to the public perception that a guilty man had walked free, a coronial inquest 8 years later determined Greg Domaszewicz probably contributed to Jaidyn's death and that it was likely he had disposed of his body.
Listen to the sense next time made, okay?
Greg, who did it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Good one. Good. Thanks.
Greg, a coroner did determine that you had disposed of Jaidyn's body and that you had some responsibility in this.
That was just part of the corroboration squad, and there's no evidence like...
You didn't dispose of his body?
No.
Greg has always contested the coronial finding, which did not change the jury's verdict in the Supreme Court that he was not guilty. Here you are, a man who was put before the courts. You were found not guilty. But all these years later, you carry the burden of a public who thinks you are.
Because the police never done their job properly.
Have you ever felt innocent?
I feel innocent, yeah, of course, but I've got this, guilt thing that if I just didn't fuck up and leave him at home, there'd be a, little boy out there and you don't even know, it's just the worst thing, all I can say is I promise that I did not kill Jaidyn, but out of all that, I lost all my house, all my assets, everything, to pay for, the case and this and that. But to me, bullet you got to bite on because, it was ultimately me that he's not with us now,
For years after Jaidyn's murder, his mother Belinda continued to believe Greg was innocent.
Because I know myself that I had nothing to do with it. Is that swearing?
And Belinda?
I've never believed Greg done it. Never, ever. Never will.
How do you feel about Belinda today?
I just, I'd love to say, sorry again. To give her, peace, which, I wish you could have, just to know, the thing of unknowing is just, must be just unbearable, but there is nothing, what can I say?
Belinda had never seen Greg's police interviews until Keith Moore sent her a copy of the videotapes years later.
I've got an email from Belinda. So this is 2003, long time afterwards. Dear Keith, I just thought I'll let you know that the tape arrived today and thank you. I feel it in my heart and I know it in my head. And I've never been so ashamed of myself. God knows why I visited him in jail, gave him money, bought him presents, and confessed love to the mongrel. It's going to take a long, long time to get over this, if ever I do at all. Thanks for making it so clear to me.
In my mind, and out into my head.
This case was sensational in every meaning of that word. Nearly 24 years on, the murder of Jaidyn Leskie remains unsolved, a source of pain, grief and regret for all involved, including everyone here. One thing is certain, a killer or killers are still walking free. From everything you've heard here at the table, has anything changed in your view about this case?
No, look, after more than 20 years of covering this, my belief is still that Greg never intended any harm to Jaidyn. He was fond of Jaidyn, but my personal belief is that Greg is responsible.
Well, and I have to say that he absolutely has not been found guilty, so therefore he is not responsible. Lise, anything you heard here today and the interview with Greg that changed any of your perceptions or thoughts?
Not so much changed them, but I would say it reinforces how important I think this case is and will continue to be. But even if it was resolved tomorrow, if somebody got a guilty verdict, I think it would still linger sort of in our collective consciousness.
So do you, Roland, have any regrets? Wish you'd done things differently?
There are reasons that things were done the way they were. My opinion is that we did still have a strong circumstantial case, but yeah, I accept, as I should, full responsibility for everything that took place.
It's a tough place to be, isn't it? You're the head of the investigation.
Well,
so much was riding on it and it failed. And you haven't changed your mind about who the prime suspect is, who did this?
Not at all, no.
Judge, finally.
I've been very interested in what everyone's had to say, but in the end, I think, from my reading anyway, the result, although disappointing for many people, was probably justified. Sadly, it must be recalled that so many lives have been ruined by these events. Jaidyn himself lost, Belinda, Greg, and many others around them. Their lives were ruined. Everybody is eager to find the truth. Everybody's eager to find a culprit, but sometimes we can't do it successfully within the justice system, and that's the way it is.
And that's the way it is with this case.
That's the way it is with this case.
Of course, if there's still someone out there who knows something, whose memory or guilt may have been sparked by what you have seen and heard, perhaps it's time to speak up. We're all still wanting to know what happened to Jaidyn Leskie. Thank you all for joining me, and thank you. I'm Liz Hayes. Good night. Hello, I'm Liz Hayes. Thanks for watching our brand new event series, Under Investigation. Subscribe to our channel now for more great stories from both Under Investigation and 60 Minutes Australia. For other exclusive Under Investigation content, visit 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.